They didn't move on slowly as they didn't take time to heal. They didn't even look confused. They just replaced you, and not in months, not even in weeks, almost instantly. One day, you're still trying to understand what's happening, trying to fix things, trying to hold on to something that already feels like it's slipping away. And the next, they're already building a life with someone else, sleeping at their place, meeting their family, living the same routine that used to be yours. And that's the part that breaks something inside you, because it doesn't feel like a breakup. It feels like you were swapped, like everything you lived, everything you built, everything you believed in could just be transferred from you to someone else, like you were never really irreplaceable, and no one prepares you for that feeling because you expect pain, you expect distance, you expect silence, but you don't expect to be replaced like you were nothing. And then your mind starts racing. Was it all fake? Did they ever really love me? Or was I just convenient? Because how does someone walk away from 18 years and act like it meant nothing? No conversation, no closure, no explanation, just I'm going. And that's it. Door closes, life continues, but not yours. Because while they move forward, you stay stuck in that exact moment, replaying everything, trying to find the point where it all stopped being real. Because deep down, you feel like something doesn't add up. Because people don't just replace someone overnight. Unless they were already gone long before they left. And that's where the real confusion begins. Because when you look back, you start noticing things you didn't want to see before. The emotional distance, the lack of presence, the way they were physically there, but never really with you. And suddenly, it hits you. Maybe they didn't move on fast. Maybe they had already moved on while still in the relationship, and you were the only one still believing in something that was already over. And that realization, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes everything you thought was real. Because now it's not just about losing them, it's about questioning the entire relationship, the memories, the moments, the love. Was any of it actually real? Or were you holding on to something that only existed for you? And this is where most people get stuck. Not in the breakup itself, but in the meaning of it. Because if they could replace you that fast, then what does that say about you? What does that say about your value? About your importance? About everything you gave? And without even realizing, you stop questioning them and start questioning yourself. And this is where things start to shift. Because what looks like a fast replacement is rarely something that started after the breakup. It just became visible after it. And that changes everything. Because now you're not just dealing with loss. You're dealing with the realization that you were the last one to know. While you were still trying, still investing, still believing, something inside them had already disconnected. Quietly, gradually, without confrontation, without honesty. And that's why it feels so sudden to you. Because your timeline and their timeline were never the same. You were still inside the relationship while they were already stepping out of it, emotionally first, mentally next, and eventually physically. And when someone leaves like that, it doesn't come with clarity. It comes with confusion. Because there was no real ending. No moment where things were clearly said. No space for closure, just a shift. that you only understood after it was already done. And this is what creates that unbearable question. How can someone move on so fast? But the real question is different. How long were they already gone before they left? Because when you look closer, you start remembering things differently. The emotional absence, the distance in conversations, the lack of depth, the way they stopped showing up, even when they were still there. And maybe you felt it, but you didn't want to fully accept it, because accepting it would mean facing something too painful. That you were alone inside a relationship, and that realization, it's heavy because it forces you to see that the ending didn't start when they left. It started long before, in small moments, in small disconnections, in things that didn't feel right, but were never fully addressed. And when someone lives like that, disconnected, detached, present only on the surface, they don't experience the breakup the same way you do. Because for them, the emotional ending already happened. They already processed it. They already accepted it, even if they never told you. So when they finally leave, they're not starting from zero. They're continuing from a place you were never invited into. And that's why it looks like they moved on overnight. But in reality, they were just ahead of you in the process. A process you didn't even know was happening. And this is where it becomes even more confusing. Because from the outside, it looks like they're happy, like they found something real, like everything is working for them, while you're still trying to understand what happened. And that creates a very specific kind of pain, not just heartbreak, but comparison. Because now you're not only grieving the relationship, you're watching them replace it effortlessly, seamlessly, like nothing was lost. And that makes you question everything. Was I not enough? Did I mean less than I thought? Was I just a phase? And this is where most people turn against themselves. Because instead of seeing what really happened, they internalize the speed of the other person as proof of their own lack of value. But the truth is, this has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with how they connect. Because some people don't process endings, they replace them. They don't sit with discomfort. They escape it. They don't go deep. They move fast. Not because they are healed, but because they're avoiding. And when you see it from that perspective, something starts to shift inside you. Because now, it's no longer about being replaced. It's about understanding that what they're building now didn't come from depth. It came from displacement. And that's a completely different thing. And this is the part no one really talks about, because it's easier to believe that they just didn't care, that they moved on fast, because you meant nothing. But the reality is often more uncomfortable than that. Because for some people, it's not about not feeling, it's about not knowing how to deal with what they feel. And instead of sitting with the pain, instead of facing the discomfort, instead of processing the ending, they replace it immediately. Not because they're ready, but because they're running. Running from silence, running from emptiness, running from themselves, because being alone would force them to feel everything they have been avoiding for years. And that's something they were never taught how to do. So they don't stop, they don't reflect, they don't go deep, they just move from one relationship to another, from one connection to the next, carrying the same patterns, the same emotional gaps, the same unresolved weight. And from the outside, it can look like they're winning, like they're happy, like everything worked out for them. But what you don't see is that nothing was actually resolved. It was just covered, delayed, pushed forward, and at some point, that always catches up. Because emotions don't disappear, they accumulate. And when they're not processed, they don't fade, they intensify, quietly, in the background, until one day, they become impossible to ignore. And that's when everything they avoided comes back. But now, stronger, heavier, harder to escape. And this is why what looks like a perfect new beginning often carries the same ending inside it. Because nothing new was built on something healed. It was built on something avoided. And that's a completely different foundation. But here's the part that truly matters for you. Because this isn't really about them anymore. It's about what this did to you. Because while they were escaping, you were feeling everything. The loss, the confusion, the abandonment, the silence, the questions that never got answers. And that's why it hurt so deeply. Because you didn't skip the process. You lived it fully. And even though it feels like you're behind, like they moved forward and you didn't, the truth is, you're the only one actually processing what happened. You're the only one building something real inside yourself, something stable, something grounded, something that won't collapse the moment life gets hard. And that doesn't feel powerful right now. It feels heavy. It feels unfair. It feels like you lost, but you didn't. You just chose a path that requires courage. Because staying, feeling, facing reality, letting something end without replacing it, that takes strength. And most people avoid that at all costs. So no, they didn't win. They just moved faster without going deeper. And speed is not the same as healing. And now you're standing in a space that feels empty, that feels uncertain, that feels unfinished. But this is also the first space that is truly yours, not shared, not dependent, not built around someone else's presence. And what you do here is what will define everything that comes next. Because now you have a choice. Keep trying to understand them. Keep looking at their lives. Keep measuring your pain against their apparent happiness. Or start turning that attention back to you, to your healing, to your boundaries, to your reality. Because closure was never something they were going to give you. It's something you create. When you stop waiting for them to explain what they were never capable of explaining. And that is when something shifts. Not outside, but inside you. Because the moment you stop asking, why did they do this? And start asking, why am I still holding on to this? You take your power back. And that's where freedom actually begins. Not when they disappear, not when they change, not when they come back, but when they no longer have access to your emotional world. And if any part of this feels familiar, if you've been trying to understand this kind of ending, then maybe this isn't about them anymore. Maybe this is the moment to start choosing yourself. And if you're trying to make sense of patterns like this, to understand what really happened and rebuild after something like this, stay here. Because this is exactly what we're going to keep breaking down, step by step.